Okay, so we set everything like basic setup, which can be used for your personal projects or YouTube videos, whatever you are doing by yourself. If you are not aiming at compositing stuff, only just for color grading. But right now we will go and set it up as the proper production pipeline, which most of the companies use and most of the companies I worked with. So let's get an open, like by clicking here, we will bring up the movie render queue and add our uh, sequence here. So with this, we will go probably different way. I'll explain what I add and why. So first of all, we will start with the EXR sequence. EXR is like universal format file, which has multi-layer in that. It's like also mentioned here, and keep it on. So the multi-layer basically can contain multiple additional passes in this single file. You will be able to have there, for example, z depth path and create your own like depths of field. You can render without depths of field and just add it on post if you like it more. For example, if you have some plugin in Nuke or Fusion for anamorphic depths of field and so on, then we will have additional paths which will be additional render which will be path tracer either or deferred rendering. Doesn't matter, path tracer if you're using path tracer, and deferred rendering if you want to render with Lumen. And you can just switch on and switch them off. For this showcase, I'll be using path tracer, and remember, always enable reference motion blur. For additional passes to be rendered, remember we have added in the very beginning when we created our project, we added additional render passes, this one. So movie render queue, additional render passes. And this actually allows you to add object IDs, which will be creating this like Cryptomate. This is the Cryptomate mask. So what it does basically, for each object in the scene, it will create the separate mask, which you can use either in Photoshop or DaVinci Resolve. So we will first render that, do this setup, render it, and then we will jump how to use that in Photoshop for retouch or in DaVinci Resolve. So let's get back to this one. By default, it uses full. That means that you will have unique per material, and this is like really heavy. Object IDs is rendered by your CPU, and as fast your CPU can prepare the frames, then it will be like passed to GPU. So you will be limited by the performance of your CPU in this render. So you can use either full, material, actor with hierarchy, or folder. So it will be just like grouping that by world outliner here. And by layer, if you are using like layers and add the text for actors. Most of the time I use actor, as it gives you less masks, but that is for my personal projects. If you go with the material, you will be able to have the mask for each material of the car. You will have like this this headlight, you will have this grouped with the windshield and other glass materials. You will have the separate mask for body color, for all these parts. Like every part will be just a single separate mask which you will be able to retouch. So for keeping it simple for now, let's go for actor. So I'll just show you how that works, and please be sure to enable include translucent objects. In that case, when you have the mask, you will have only the mask for the body, and you will not have the translucent mask. Or if you would like to make this one, the environment, darker, because you will have the separate mask, and if you have the environment here, then when you make it darker or brighter, it will be making darker or brighter this area where you can see this environment. So it will be like see-through, and that will be really hard to mitigate and to battle this one. So make sure that you are including translucent object for that one. Then we will get anti-aliasing. So for my path tracer, I will use what I said before, this combination. And for this one, we will do just that. We don't need any console variables or color output. We will do the color output a little bit later. So the thing is, like with the color output, when you render from Unreal Engine using EXR sequence, it will make it in color space linear sRGB, just as most of the 3D softwares. When you render from any like 3D software, which is like industry standard or something like that, that color space will not match with what you will see in DaVinci Resolve or Premiere Pro. So this will be sRGB linear, and it always be like that. You can override that with the color output, and that will be like aces or whatever you want. So for this one, we will just use right now linear sRGB, and I will show you how to fix that in DaVinci Resolve, but this is only like for masking purpose. So to create the Cryptomate. So after that, we would need to add the game overrides for path tracing. As I said, I don't need that, but this is like universal setup for either path tracer or deferred rendering. You can enable them at the same time, and they will give you, you know, different. You will have two different files. So in output here, we would need to again use the 6th and 7th frame, and for the sake of it, also, like, it depends on the production. If they ask you to create, for example, each shot in the different folder, you can just like type it like this, and Unreal will be creating the folder with a sequence name, which is like pretty neat, and you can have it like separately in the each folder, and you know that they will not, you know, override or something happens in that case. Or you can use date, for example, too. That is like easy for versioning, so you can just like check what Unreal Engine offers in these comments, like by typing there something, like it usually gives you something here. So if you open this one, yes, so this is date, time, year, months, day, version, like even like that. So you can use whatever you like the most. So this is it. I will just use for this, for example, date. Let's use date. So that will be date. And also there is one thing in the camera. I always keep it the frame center, but what is important with the camera, that there is overscan percentage. Sometimes they may ask you to give like the compositor, or like if you're having the supervisor, CG supervisor on your project, they may ask you for some overscan percentage. That means it will render a little bit more each frame's like left, right, and so on. So it will give you more space around there from what you actually see from the frame. That is sometimes needed if compositor will be moving the footage a little bit, or if they would like to use the camera shake and shake it basically in Fusion or Nuke, they would need some extra space on each side for this to be performed. And this is just like on demand, but for you to know where the overscan percentage is, so you won't be surprised if the CG supervisor or compositor asks you for a little bit of overscan percentage. Right now we don't need that. So we have EXR sequence, object IDs, path tracer, anti-aliasing, always like reference motion blur, and in anti-aliasing we will set engine warm-up count frames. Hit accept, and basically let's save this one as like path tracer linear, right? So we have the linear color space here. Hit accept and hit render local, and let's wait for this one to be rendered. That was pretty quick, I think. And if we click there, it will guide us to this date, today's date, and this one will be our file. But if we drop that one into DaVinci Resolve, you'll see that it looks nothing like it looks in Unreal Engine, right? Because here, even if I switch to path tracing, and let me disable editor update so it will be working properly. Okay, so see, it is much, much brighter. And what has happened here, and as I said, it is displayed in linear sRGB, and in DaVinci Resolve, To fix that, you need to go to Color tab and go to Color Space Transform and set up sRGB linear and set it to Rec 709, Rec 709. And now we have the same picture in both of our software. So as you can see, all works fine and you can start color grading there. We will talk about the color grading later. This is just a quick fix how to use the linear sRGB color space and how to fix this one in DaVinci Resolve. In Photoshop, it will be just opened as it should. There is no color space transform required, and that will be working as intended. Also, some additional passes that you can add also together with the Cryptimate are depths and world normals. Basically, what is world normals? So if you check out this pass, you'll see that you have world normals. So this one is used for relighting the scene, and this one can be used by compositor. But how we can add that as the separate path for our render? For this case, Unreal Engine has additional post-processing materials. So here they are. Here you have world depth. This is basically the Z pass, so the depths, and you will be able to understand how world, actually, do we have world depth here in the preview? Scene depth with world units. Nothing is there. Yep, can't see this one, unfortunately, but anyway, that will render this one. So let's switch back to post tracing. Anyway, so here you can add those two materials. This one is motion vectors. Not all of the apps understand motion vectors. This is what you need actually to give your compositor, if he does that in Nuke, give the compositor the documentation for Unreal Engine where and how to use the motion vectors from this one. This one can be used for creating motion blur or something like that, but I'm not sure if Nuke can do that actually based on motion vectors. So the basic one is the world depth. So we need to enable that, and we will have the Z pass for our depth, and we will be able to add the autofocus or depth of field based on world depth or a compositor even can add some fog based on the depth path. And another one which you need to add is, like, you just add the new element, new array, and here click enabled and look for world normals. And this is the one which you need, movie render queue, world normal. You can also, as always, like browse what it has, movie render queue. So you can have ambient occlusion, you can have world depth and world normals, and also this is different one, world position. This is what you can get, all those passes, which may be asked by compositor or CGI supervisor, but just warn them if there is something missing and you can't export that one, just keep it as it is. For now, we will need only world normal and world depth. And this is it, and we can render that one with full masks and full passes, and we will talk a little bit later on the compositing stage in the next part of this module about how to work with that in DaVinci Resolve Fusion. And this is it. Next, if your company works with the ACES workflow and ACES pipeline, we would need to set up the color profile. In order to do that, we need to create open color IO configuration, and let's name it ACES. So your company may use ACES workflow, so they would like to have everything in ACES, and that should be all aligned and all the same. So in that case, when you create this color profile, there is like desired color spaces. You need to add two, basically the one which will be is Unreal default one, and the output will be what we need. So first we need to pick utility, and by default, as I said, Unreal uses linear sRGB or Rec 709 here. And the second one, which will be outputted, is like ACES CC, ACES CCT, ACES CG, or ACES 2065 one. Those are like different. I will not be diving right now into the differences of those profiles. So what basically is like, you need to ask your supervisor or your composer what ACES version they need, or like which option they would like to pick. For most of the CGI stuff, it's used ACES CG, which is actually like the linear version of ACES. But for this, we will just go with the ACES CCT just for the sake of the tutorial. We'll save this one, and now we have the prepared OpenIO configuration. Before, Unreal didn't have this configuration file, and you need to download that. You need to import this one, like locate it there. But right now you don't need to do that. From version 5.2, I believe, they already built this profile inside of Unreal, and it works really well. When you are doing this, so we have Path Tracer Linear, and right now let's create another one with a color output profile and transform source. We need first to add ACES, and transform source should be linear, and the transform destination should be ACES CCT. And you need to pick that OCO configuration is enabled, because otherwise it will ignore this setting. It just doesn't care about this. So just put is enabled. It will disable tone curve automatically, even though there is no tick. If you read this one, it will tell you that it is force disabled if OpenColor IO is applied, and we have it applied. And let's save this as preset, and we will name it Path Tracer ACES. Save, accept, and then we will just let's name it differently, because it will get into our same folder. So let's name it ACES here. Okay, hit accept and render local again. So see, that is looking completely different, because this one is transformed into ACES color profile. And this one mostly suits for Nuke or Fusion or DaVinci Resolve. I never opened ACES profile in Photoshop, so I don't know. For Photoshop, probably you'd better stick with the linear one if you would like to make the stills renders and do some retouch. And if you right now go to our folder, take our ACES, and you see that it is like flat looking, right? Because this is ACES color space, and this is how it looks. And in color, we will set up also a little bit later how to make it with the ACES pipeline with DaVinci Resolve in the color grading stage a little bit later, next part of this module. But just for your understanding, if you are lazy, you just like dropped it here and you would like to make a transform, you need to search for ACES transform, and you should pick the input, which is ACES CCT, and set the output to Rec 709. Bam, all looks fine, all is beautiful. And this is the beauty of working with ACES, because everything which comes, for example, you have the camera, for example, Arri Alexa log C is transformed into ACES, and from ACES it is transformed to Rec 709, and you will get the same color space for all your different sources, and it is easier for colorists, for example, to match the footage or match the look on CGI shots and for real filmed footage.